there's that. All right, so the recording's in progress. So if you're watching this right now on somewhere else besides live and you're watching us on YouTube, welcome. I'm going to fill a little bit of time as attendees are joining us here for the live webinar. And welcome as you're coming in. To Aimie, I've lost count on how many virtual events we've done, which I just adore doing with you.
Oh, I think 4 or 5 by now.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's been quite a few. Yeah.
yeah, I love doing I still love doing the virtual events. I know that some stores have kind of like gotten away from doing them, but I still think this is a great way for audience members who maybe can't get to a store to see you in person, living in
Yeah, for
different
sure.
parts of the world. I just think it's a great way to still keep talking about books and highlighting new things that you authors are coming up with. So,
Yeah.
while we're giving everybody a chance to settle in, Aimie, where are you calling in from today?
Estes Park, Colorado, my beautiful hometown.
Yeah,
Well, adopted hometown. I wasn't born here.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a gateway to the Rocky Mountain National Park.
Oh,
Fall colors are in all their glory. We've got elk bugling outside. It's glorious.
love
Just
it.
glorious.
So your weather's good today?
Oh yeah, it's like 80 degrees.
Oh,
It's warm for this time of year.
yeah.
So like yeah, I'm in just, short sleeves and yeah.
Got a little bit
Okay,
warmer than it's any.
I'm still stuck on the idea that elk bugle. This is a
Yes.
thing. They bugle. That's
Yes,
the
it's this time of year the male elk bugle and it literally sounds kind of like an out of tune, bugler trying to attract the ladies. It's elk for what's your
Oh,
sign? Because this is the mating season and so you have to be very careful in town. Like seriously, like I can't overemphasize how many elk we have that descend from the park as it gets cooler into town like hanging around the McDonald's parking lot, like the golf course. You cannot golf this time of year effectively. And my favorite, like walking trail, not hiking trail, but walking trail that goes around the lake, around the town. Like you have to be careful. I almost slammed into a bull elk the other day, just walking around listening to my audiobook. And there was an elk right around the corner, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder to let me know that I was like within 10 feet of a male elk and they get very territorial this time of year.
ooh,
The males are dangerous now, the females are dangerous in the spring when they have their babies.
super.
Yeah.
Who knew? Who knew?
Yeah. No, but we've got videos of them walking up and down the main street looking like they're going into the taffy shops. It's crazy.
Crazy.
thing.
And Kate
Yeah.
Quinn, we've hosted you numerous times in person and virtual, and we love having you back. And thank you for doing this interview with Aimie today.
Yes,
Um,
thank you.
Oh, it's
but
my pleasure. This was so much fun because I just went on, and I'll probably talk a little bit more about this in our conversation, but I was just on a trip to France. And I saved this book specifically for when I was in Paris because what do you read in Paris but a book called Mademoiselle Eiffel? It was perfect. It was karma, kismet, fate, wonderful.
and
So, and
great
it was
cover,
a great
everything.
read while you were in Paris.
Perfect. And you have some news. You are now, where are you calling in from? Because you used to be here in San Diego and then you kind of went up the coast here a little bit. So, but now you're in someplace completely different.
Yep, I move around a lot. Thank you to the U.S. Navy, and I am now in Maryland, and that's my domicile for the foreseeable future. That is going to be the place where I'm going to be calling home. Since my husband is going to be out of the Navy by the time we have to move again, which is nice. That feels like I've moved on an average of every 1 to 3 years for more or less the past 7. So this is at
That's a
least
lot. That is a
that's a
lot.
lot.
There's some good weeding that probably happens, weeding out of things that probably happens in all those moves.
Yeah, there is that, but it does discourage you from becoming a pack rat. But on the other hand, it is nice to finally have all of my books assembled and in one place. Although you can see, I am not totally in the background. I
Yeah,
am
I
not
love
totally
that.
away from the stacks of cardboard boxes face.
Oh, yeah. I think I still have some. I moved into my house 28 years ago. I still think there's boxes in the attic. So just saying. All right, everybody. So, For tonight's, for those that don't know, I'm Julie Slavinsky. I'm the director of events of Warwick's. We are located in La Jolla, which is a little bit north of San Diego, for those that may not have come into one of our virtual events before. For tonight's conversation, Aimie and Kate are going to talk for about 35-ish minutes. We love to have audience questions too, so I will bring those into the conversation after they're done. I know everybody's used to Zoom, but just in case you're not, if you scroll over your screen, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. Go ahead and pop your questions into there. What I'm going to do in the chat is I'm going to put how to order Aimie's book in that chat. And if you are located here in San Diego, we'd love for you to stop by the store and pick it up. Lots of other good things to look at the store here while you're picking up Aimie's book. But also we can ship that to you if you're located here in the 48 contiguous US. So with that, let me introduce these ladies and then I'm going off screen. Aimie K. Runyan is a multi-published and best-selling author of historical and contemporary fiction. She has been nominated for a Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Writer of the Year Award. That's a hard one to put together. A Historical Novel Society's Editor Choice Selection and a 4-time finalist for the Colorado Book Awards. She is an adjunct 5 times? We have to update your bio here.
I'm the Susan Lucci of the Colorado Book Awards. I've been nominated 5 times and never won.
Oh,
so yes.
We're going to have to update that bio. So 5-time finalist. I love it though. But you know what? Being a finalist is a good thing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. She's an adjunct instructor for the Drexel University MFA in Creative Writing program and endeavors to be active in the literary community in Colorado and beyond. And like Kate talked about earlier, she's here to talk about her new book, Mademoiselle EIFFEL. So can't wait for this conversation. And joining Aimie, there's that beautiful cover. Joining Aimie is Kate Quinn. Kate is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of historical fiction. A native of, what's that?
And a cute dog has decided to
And a cute tiny dog is just walking by, but we love our cute dogs that walk by. A native of Southern California, but now somewhere else. She attended Boston University, where she earned bachelor's and master's degree in classical voice. A lifelong history buff, she has written 4 novels in the Empress of Rome saga and 2 books set in the Italian Renaissance before turning to the 20th century with the Alice Network, The Huntress, The Rose Code, The Diamond Eye, The Phoenix Crown, and The Briar Club. All have been translated into multiple languages. Yes, lots of love there. Ladies, have a great conversation. I'll see you in a little bit.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, I am sorry, we did have a little gate crasher here. This is Caesar, who's decided he wants to also give his opinion.
Hello, Caesar. Yeah. He's so cute.
And I will say I live for your cat photos. I mean, I
love Gigi boy, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you can't tell, but I've had Zuri, our other cat, rubbing against my legs. It is currently 7 minutes past dinner time, and my family's coming back from a volleyball game, so they're going to be like sneaking upstairs, but the cats are like, it's 7 minutes late, ma'am.
I don't think there's a ma'am on that. I think that is like, Minion, you are late.
That's true. That's true.
We are starving. We are in danger.
Yeah, exactly.
We are in an imminent peril of demise here.
Yes, exactly. Well, Zuri would probably refer to me as some sort of expletive, whereas Gigi would say, where's the butler? Where's the, because I'm management. My husband is the butler. And so that's just the hierarchy according to Gigi Cat.
Of course, so, absolutely.
Yeah,
cats have the dogs have owners, cats have staff.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we are definitely, for anybody who is watching here, we're going to keep this a spoiler-free talk about Mademoiselle EIFFEL, so no worries about that. But why don't you give us a little bit of the elevator pitch rundown, just to give our readers, our future readers, a baseline for what this book is about.
Well, it is the story of Claire EIFFEL, as the title might suggest. She's the oldest daughter of Gustave Eiffel, the famous architect, built a tower you guys have all seen a lot lately on TV, thanks to the Olympics. And what isn't known is that his daughter took over the running of his household and the raising of his 4 younger children when Gustave's wife died, when Claire was only 14. And so his wife was only 32 and left behind 5 kids. And she not only took over the traditional duties of child rearing and managing the staff in the house, she became his right-hand woman in a business perspective as well. and became active in the Compagnie EIFFEL and even accompanied him to Portugal 2 months after her mother died. So it was a very quick transition from child to basically helpmeet for her father in a very short order. And she's really not known, even though we see her likeness in wax depicted at the top of the Eiffel Tower with, you've got Gustave Eiffel there, and you've got Thomas Edison sitting next to him, crouched back, looking like they're talking about light bulbs or what have you. And she's standing back there looking ready to serve coffee. But nobody knows who she is. And so it was really an honor to be able to get to tell her story.
So what was the spark of inspiration behind this book? What made you want to tell Claire's story?
Well, what's funny is that I've written A Bakery in Paris, and it struck me that because I loved writing A Bakery in Paris. It's one of my top two favorite books I've ever, as far as a writing process, it was absolutely just one of those books that was just enjoyable from start to finish. And of course, it's kind of like childbirth, forgetting some of the trauma, but I'm sure it was there. But I loved writing the 1870s when Paris was building itself back after the Paris Commune and the Siege of Paris, and the Franco-Prussian War. And I thought it was amazing how Paris hit its zenith of culture, the center of cultural influence over the entire Western world. So shortly thereafter, the World's Fair was in 1889, less than 20 years after a really catastrophic event in French history. And I just thought it was amazing how quickly it rebounded. And I wanted to set a story in the Belle Epoque, the beautiful era. And so I was digging around and I thought, oh, Moulin Rouge, that would be really cool. I could, contrast that with the upper bourgeoisie. And of course, the Eiffel Tower. And I'm like, does Gustave have a wife or kids or a daughter that I could focus a story on? And Claire just leapt off the page.
You do
Because
the
her
same
story,
thing that I do, where you get interested in something and then you're like, can I find a woman? What were the
yeah,
women?
find a woman. Yeah, because isn't that what we do?
Yes,
Yeah, that's what we do. We shine a flashlight on the women that have just been axed out of the history books. And so I'm like, well, I could do a compare contrast with a can-can dancer and Claire Eiffel. And our mutual wonderful editor, Tessa Woodward, said, Claire is enough. And first of all, how would the can-can dancer and Claire really have met up, etc.? She's like, it's not plausible. I did sneak in the Moulin Rouge for a chapter or two.
I noticed.
But yes, that was fun. But Claire really was enough story. And it took some digging to find it because, she was a woman that was not like on her own, all that well known, other than she was Mademoiselle Eiffel. And that, that's just how she was known. And so I had to reconstruct a lot, but I was just fascinated that this woman who had so much more influence than the average woman of that era had just gone almost completely unnoticed in history.
So what was the research like for, digging into Claire's life? Because, as you say, she
Yeah.
is more on the periphery of these more well-known names. So how did you find her? How did you find her? How did you dig into her?
I had to, it was a bit of reverse engineering to kind of figure out where she was and what she was doing based on where her father was and what he was doing. I had to pull her out of the shadows through her father and extrapolate a lot. But I mean, I got to go to Paris twice. Such a hardship, guys. Such a hardship. I got to go to Paris twice.
My heart bleeds for you.
I know, right? And so the first time I was on a trip with my husband, it was our proper honeymoon in 2022. We got married in 21 and we did like a big car tour all over the United States, but we couldn't leave the United States because COVID. And so 2022 was our big European adventure. And I got to spend an entire day at the archives. The Eiffel family archives are housed in the Musée d'Orsay. And I got permission from the family and the archives to spend a day there with ye old cell phone snappity snap for for an entire day, praying the battery would hold out, borrowing a cord when it didn't. And it was hectic. And but it was amazing, and it was enough to get the first draft done. And there was a lot of correspondence right around the time when the story opens, like when her mother passed away. You can tell it's all correspondence that took place in mourning because all the stationery is outlined in black. which was a wonderful, and you know, there's some of her childhood correspondence. But after that period, and she's writing back to her aunt, worried about her younger siblings and how they're faring while they're in Portugal and their mother's gone. Um, but then, like, a lot of the correspondence dries up during the period I wanted to write about, because Claire and her father were separated, or were attached at the hip. And so there wasn't a lot of need for her to communicate, because she was in Paris and with her father so much during that all important era. So it was a lot of reverse engineering. And I got to go back after the first draft was done for an entire week. I spent 2.5 days in the archives to fill in the gaps. And then I got to go to the National Library and visit all the places where Claire lived, most of which have been like, her house on the Rue de Prony is now an insurance office. Their beautiful mansion on the Rue Rabelais has been destroyed and is now the Israeli embassy. So you can't get near it because there's a bunch of scary men with machine guns in front of it. And let's see what else. And like, the church where they were married is still, where Claire was married is still there. So I got to visit there. But it was just amazing to like walk in the places where she spent time, you know, in the Paris Opera House and the Café de la Paix, where she would have gone for a swanky evening out, etc. It was just so much fun.
And you had to sit in those cafes and, eat all those tax deductible macarons just the way Claire would do.
Exactly. I did a taste test. Yeah, and I was also getting ready to start marketing a bakery in Paris. So I did a taste test of macarons, so you don't have to. Guys, Laudray, I hate to say it, and they're all made in Switzerland, and they're all like, every macaron you get from Laudray has at one point been frozen. But I'm sorry, it's hard. Except Angelina's chocolate macaron are fabulous. But and I tried all kinds. Like there's some weird vegan ones, all kinds. But Laudray, yeah.
All right. Well,
the gold standard.
Now we know the place.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask you what your favorite scene in that book is to write, or your favorite scene afterward. But I would like to start that by, can I tell you mine?
Yes.
Because I absolutely cheered when I read this particular scene, which I adored. And it's a great scene. And don't worry, I'm not spoiling anything super important for people who are thinking about the book. But this is a scene where Claire, she is still only about 14. She's sort of stepped into her mother's spot in many ways. She's the woman of the house now, and she is taken to I guess probably the French would be un lingère, to be fitted for her first adult corset. She's only had like some childhood clothes up till now, and now she is getting an adult corset. And I am thinking like, oh boy, I know where this scene is going, because we've all read this scene, right? There is I always think of it as like, the routine. Oh, thank you. The wine service.
Hi, Stephen.
How you doing, darling?
It's a big Zoom event. So.
Sorry, I'm out.
Anyway, the wine service arrived, but I'm thinking like, okay, I know this scene because we've seen this scene in so many movies and in books, and it's what I think of as like the performative bitching about historical corsets, where the girl puts it on and she's like, she is so confined, she feels so terrible, the dreadful pressure of the whalebone, through the patriarchy, that forced her into this position, all of this stuff. And there's the scene instead where Claire puts her corset on, and for the first time, and she settles into it, and she's just like, this is great. This feels like armor. Like, I feel like I am girded for battle here. I love this. And, I was just like, I love this scene. Because it so plays against the type of what we are expecting to find, because really those scenes are very, very common in books and in historical movies as well, where there's, the scene where the woman has to, bitch and moan about her corset. And I actually really liked this, was where Claire put hers on and was like, no, this is great. I love this feeling. And, honestly, I should have known I was in better hands with you. There wasn't going to be a scene that was, that cliched as, hashtag hate the corset, stuff, we see in the list of books.
Yeah, but I remember talking to you because I remember messaging you saying, I think Claire's grandma's taking her corset shopping, because I will tell you, every scene where Bonne Maman EIFFEL comes in was dreadfully fun to write, because she was such a heinous
Oh, she
woman.
was such a dragon.
Yeah, she was. I mean, she meant well, and that's the scary thing. She really did. But yeah, so she was really what drove the entire first act of the book, and figuring out that the moment after the funeral was the place to start the book was really a turning point, because I rewrote the first three chapters of this book like three times, and our lovely mutual agent Kevin said, "This is not where you start the book. No, try again. This is not where you start the book." And suddenly I'm like, oh, we're bringing in Ben Mama Fell, because I'd read all these accounts of how difficult she was. And I said, and you said, you said, don't make it cliche. And I'm like, oh no, I've got plans for this. And I researched, and the Maison Leotie, where she goes shopping, was a real place. And they made corsets that allowed for some freedom of movement, but still gave the va 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 boom, and allowed for the fashion of the time to work on the female body, but they were far less dreadful than the old whalebone and steel corset. And I've tight laced before. I've worn probably owned a half dozen corsets in my life, because historical nerd. What can I say? And they're really, if they are tailor made, not that bad. I mean, and there's nothing worse in the world than an ill fitting corset. But these people knew what they were doing, and they made a zillion corsets a day. And I like the idea of her feeling like she was protected and insulated from the outside world, because she was going to have to find her steel and whalebone awfully darn quick if she was going to take over her mother's role, and especially if she wasn't going to be cowed by her grandmother, who was a force of nature. She was the reason that Gustav's father was successful. She was the reason that Gustav was successful. She wrote the letter introducing her Gustav to his wife. She was a driving force. And she basically did an arranged marriage for her son when he'd had 3 rejected proposals because he wasn't posh enough. So yeah, and so any scene with Ben Mama Fell was probably one of my favorites. And I really liked when Claire stood up to her brother. Those were really fun scenes as well, because he needed his comeuppance.
Yeah, he did. And that was one of the things, that was like, it really has a huge influence on Claire's life, because she's not just her father's daughter and like his right hand woman. It's because her father does not really have an heir for the architecture business in either of his sons.
Yes.
Claire is sort of nudged toward his most promising architectural, partner, as a way of keeping the business in the family, like you marry the eldest daughter. And it's one of those things where she kind of has to ask herself, like, what am I really prepared to give up?
Exactly, because she'd never expected that marriage was going to be something that her father would have. I mean, he would have say for sure. I mean, she was not. I didn't want to create some 21st century woman stuck in a 19th century corset and shove our modern values. She would have listened to her father's. She would have asked for his blessing for a husband, but she thought that she was going to be driving that bus. But the reality was she was so wrapped up in her father's affairs that she may never have gotten to it if her father hadn't done some more than gentle shoving in that direction, I think. And this was something that I had to invent on my own. But I think that it really did end up being, it did end up being a love match. I really do think, based on, just it was Adolf taking pictures of his wife, and the way that he captured the pictures of her. There's like pictures from the early 20th century, like 1908, and they're color photos, not colorized. They're early adopters. And there's pictures of Claire with her children, and she just looks at them so adoringly, but the camera looks at her so adoringly that that Adolf was head over heels for this woman, and that you just can't fake that.
Yeah.
And so I just love the idea of them coming to this arrangement, a marriage of convenience, sort of, but a marriage for love at the end of the day.
And I will say, for anybody who, is also a romance reader, marriage of convenience that becomes a love match is one of my favorite tropes personally. And
Yes.
it's so beautifully done here. So
Well,
you will
thank you.
enjoy that, even if this book is not strictly speaking a historical romance. There's just a lovely romance in it, but it is a great trope and it's very well done here. So you will have fun with that. So,
Yeah.
how did Claire differ from some of your other historical heroines? Because you've really had a very, varied bunch.
Yeah, it's true. So, I mean, she's the first one based on a real human being. I've had historical figures make cameos before, but my previous kind of shtick has been creating taking a historical tidbit, like Russian female fighter pilots in World War II, or American telephone operators in World War One, and creating my own cast of characters to tell a story about what was going on. And this was the first time that I took a woman really, pulled from the history pages, and she's in as a sense in a more traditional role than a lot of my other historical heroines who were breaking the mold. She really is part of the mold, but it shows her resisting against it, and it shows her working around it in a sense. Whereas, she's not off fighting, she's not off flying airplanes, and she's not in the trenches saving the telephone operating boards from fire a mile away from the front in World War One. She's not doing that, but she's in the trenches, metaphorically speaking, trying to keep her father's business afloat and problem solving, situation handling. And she's always got to be the one with the cool head in the room. Always, because the first time she goes shrill, the first time she gets upset, she will be branded as being hysterical. And she cannot afford that to happen. Even with her husband, who respects her as much as a man of the era respected his wife. His father, who admired her for her abilities and not just her, her sweet, demure behavior or demeanor. She had to be very measured, cold, cool, calculating, and to be able to give advice when the men were ready to, throw their snifters of brandy against the wall and watch it shatter. She could never afford to lose her cool, and she had to be the one to offer her sage advice with a cool head and a cooler tongue, so that she would stand a chance of being taken seriously.
Yeah, and I think that I remember as I was reading this, like one of the things that you did for Claire is that you gave her some ambitions of her own, and you weren't
Yes.
sure if that was, possibly, something that she really did have in real life. But in this version, at least, and I certainly found it perfectly plausible, Claire has artistic ambitions. You see her as a young
Yes.
girl. She loves to paint. She has a friend who is a painter, and the two of them want to make careers in this way, and then life has other plans for Claire.
Yes, and being a painter was done very deliberately for a few reasons. First of all, it was plausible. Young ladies, it was encouraged for young ladies to become skilled in portraiture. It was cool, right? And not necessarily having ambition to go, have an exhibit at the Louvre, but to become competent in portraiture or still life or whatever, what have you. So that was acceptable, and it's something that nobody in her family would have restrained her from. But she does develop more of an ambition, and she doesn't talk about it boldly with her family. But it also serves to give her an insight into her father and her husband's world of design, and it gives her it gives her a vocabulary to engage with them. But it also gives her, hope for something beyond the four walls of her home. And Ursula really is her doppelganger. Ursula answers the question, what if her mother had lived? And she wouldn't have become a famous painter more than likely. It was too hard of a slog for most women, even with the EIFFEL name. But she would have been able to pursue it, and she would have been able to give it a legit shot, so that she could have, shuffled off this mortal coil, knowing that she'd given it an earnest shot. But she has a tremendous amount of respect for the female painters who did make it. Like Rosa Bonheur is one who's featured in the book, and she did these wonderful pastoral images of these men like herding cattle. And it's something that was new in the time, painting the everyday, These were not like portraits of nobles. This was not like, a religious depiction. These are dirty men herding cattle. It looks like something out of the American West. The color palette's very muted, but the perspective is fascinating, and it feels so real, but in a very impressionistic sort of way. And I can imagine Claire just being, a low-key obsessed with this woman who had managed to create these massive works of art that were being shown right along with the men at the World's Fair.
And that's, really one of the main struggles in the novel is the fact that Claire realizes there's things she's going to have to give up if she's going to be the mainstay and support that her family needs, specifically, especially her father, and then her father and her husband and the company. And, I think it's very timely because, there's a lot of discussion now about what is it that they call it? Like the unpaid labor that women do.
The emotional labor, unpaid labor.
Emotional labor, the unpaid labor, the extra work that women do just being the mainstay, being the person who has the answers, the person who is, sort of quietly propping up everything in the home so it doesn't fall down. And I think that, this does feel like a very timely story in that way because, it's like I was constantly thinking while I was reading this book, it's like, would Gustav Eiffel, who had a famous name, not just for creating the Eiffel Tower, but also, he had the company that also did the work on the Statue of Liberty, for God's sake. I mean, something that is, dominating the skyline in an iconic sense of two of the most major cities in the world, and that's his work.
Yep,
but
absolutely.
would he have ever been that successful if he didn't have basically the complete dedication and unpaid 24/7 labor of this intelligent, capable, gifted daughter who gave up so much to give him everything that she had?
No, and I mean, I know as a mother and a wife that I'm the one that is, I know the names of all my kids' teachers. They're both in middle school, so it's like, a dozen teachers, and I'm keeping up on their grades. I've got the doctor's appointments, volleyball games. I literally came in here, like I got to attend my daughter's volleyball game for half an hour and rush here so that I would not miss this, and that's just the reality. And so, yeah, it felt very close to home. I won't lie. Because I mean, that's the way, the woman doesn't work is the biggest, it's the biggest con of the 20th century is that, no woman of mine's going to work. Well, she's working her butt off. And even before you have kids, because it's, the cooking, the cleaning, the managing of the household schedules, the doctor's appointments, all those things were things that, if you were working a 40-hour job, you had somebody at home taking care of that stuff. So you didn't have to.
I still remember there was something that was like a woman made a point at a boardroom where she said, how many people here know how much milk they have in their fridge? And like all the women at the table raised their hand, because that's something that you have to devote space and mental energy to, is like, are we running out of milk? Does someone need to go to the grocery store to get the milk? And you see Claire, who does, she does have the privilege of having servants. She is in a large and, rather wealthy household. So she's not, scrubbing the baseboards or going out to buying the milk herself, but still everything that she does, all of her considerable mental energy really is devoted to making her father's life easier. And so,
and her husband's, and her husband, she's managing two households under one roof. So it's very interesting that Claire and Adolf lived with Gustav for the rest of his life, his and Adolf's life. Gustav and Adolf were nice enough to die within 3 months of each other. It's crazy. And and they lived under the same roof. Claire and Adolf paid rent for a specific set of rooms. They keep everything above board. But there's no way that these men would have been able to achieve what they did without her. I mean, because, she had staff, but then she had to manage the staff. I mean, ask anybody who's in charge of managing people. That's work. Yeah.
Yeah, there were times when I kind of did want her to, I wanted to like, reach in there and tell Claire, it's like, tell them to manage their own damn social lives and the company functions. Just tell them to do it themselves. You take your easel and you head off to Giverny and you get your own paint
Yeah,
done,
yeah, exactly. And like there's a scene where she has to basically plead with Adolf to have an afternoon by herself at the expo to look at the art exhibit without him, checking his watch. Because and he had an artist side too, but he's a man of business first and foremost. He was always going to be thinking about what he had to do at home. And she didn't have three, her two kids, or I guess one and one on the way. I'm trying to think of when this all happened, but she didn't have to
pregnancy
worry.
math. That is the
Yeah.
bane of writers everywhere is pregnancy math. We're letting
Oh,
you
my first book
know.
was such a mess. I'm like, I think I had the same character pregnant with the same kid 3 times. Yeah. But yeah, so I think she was expecting her second, and she was expecting her second. The first one, it's like the nanny was taking care of the first kid. The second kid was going to become her sole focus so very soon that she wanted an afternoon to stroll around and look at art. And, without a chaperone, without her husband, without her father, she wanted the space to breathe. And that's when Ursule comes back into her life, because Ursule really is her doppelganger. And she represents her desire to be an artist and what might have happened if her mother had lived.
Well, it is. I do want to add one last thing, one other thing about the cover of this book, because I remember you and me talking about this because we have joked before in the past about how many historical novels, if they're set in the 20th century, have the Eiffel Tower on the cover. Actually,
Yes.
I had an early one of my very first draft of the Alice Network had the
Mhm.
Eiffel Tower on the cover until I was like, guys, like there's hardly any of the book that's actually in Paris. I think we put another building there and they ended up giving me Big Ben instead. And I thought that was better. But it was like there's the Eiffel Tower is on so many book covers. And I remember you and me, DMing and we were saying, but I remember saying, you're gonna actually have to have not you're gonna have the Eiffel Tower on the cover, obviously, but you're gonna need like the Eiffel Towerist of all Eiffel Tower covers. Like there
Yes,
will be no Eiffel Towering like the Eiffel Tower on this cover.
yeah, you're gonna Eiffel Tower this cover like you've Eiffel Towered no cover before. And I told them that one idea I had was all black with a red Eiffel Tower. Nothing else like that. That would have been fine. But they said, no, we have to have Claire on the cover. Okay, fine. And we spent a lot of time on her dress. But I said, first of all, the Eiffel Tower had to be red because that's the color it was when it was built to attract attention. And,
And I
I
did not
like the
know that.
idea.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, and been repainted several times in the course of its history. I mean, the traditional color we all know in our lifetime is really three different colors of bronze, basically, that makes it look like it's one solid color based on how the light's hitting it. And of course, it got repainted gold for the Olympics, which is super cool. But so it was red to attract attention when it was first built, and it's been brown, it's been yellow. But I like the idea of having a sketch, then complete, and then illuminated at first. And they decided they wanted to inverse that. And I see why they did that. But they had it originally on parchment sketched out, and it was just so much beige. And so I had a really good friend of mine who is good at graphic design, Chris Walder. She's amazing. I said, Chris, as a favor to me, could you just swap the parchment out for blue paper, for blue blueprint paper, and just change the color of the font so it pops? And it took her like 10 minutes. And I owe her my love and gratitude for the rest of my life. I said, guys, can we consider something like this? And they sent me a version with like, of course they found blueprint paper they could have the rights to and stuff, and it was slightly different, but they're like, yeah, we like it. And we got the whole William Morrow crew on board with it. And I think honestly it's very successful as a cover. And Claire's there and she feels dwarfed by the tower, which is what the feeling I really wanted to evoke, was her being overshadowed by this tower. That represents her father's ambition.
Now I remember, like, since I do have this opera background, I've been to the opera quite a lot. And I remember a production of La Boheme that I saw, which, is the Paris opera, and that is very much Belle Epoque Paris. And it had one of the best set designs I can remember seeing, because, you had this artist's garret. And in the background, you saw, once it opened up and you saw the cityscape, there was the half-built Eiffel Tower in the background. And
Yes.
the lovers, the artistic lovers are, wandering Paris and very much in love. But it was the half-built tower that I always thought was like, that was the perfect touch, because really
Yes.
there is no other building that has come to symbolize a city the way that the Eiffel
Yep.
Tower is Paris. Although, wasn't there supposedly a line from like Emily in Paris where they say someone calls it a telegraph pole, the publicist?
No, that's Ted Lasso.
Oh, it
Yeah,
is. Okay.
it's a lamp post with a publicist. Hannah Waddingham says it, and then yeah, it's a lamp post with a publicist. And I was working on the book when she said that. I sprayed, seltzer water halfway across my living room when I heard her say that. And I was just like, yeah, it's hilarious because honestly, I think I could see Gustav Eiffel himself getting a chuckle out of that line because
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, it's a radio tower with a publicist. It really is what it is. And, it's an amazing place to get a great view of Paris, but it's not the only place to get an amazing view of Paris.
I
And,
speak as someone who just in the last few weeks I managed to go up to, not the very top, but I did get to the second level and had a glass of champagne and
rough.
looked out over the Seine, and that was wonderful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right, so
I
I think we are looking at probably we'll talk all night. And
Yes, you guys have to give us the hook because, yes.
no hooks here.
but yes, if we have questions, we can happily answer them now.
Yeah.
I know. So let's get some audience questions going. But before we get to that, I and apologize if Kate, you've already asked this of Aimie at the beginning. I was doing some technical stuff in the background. But Aimie, I'm dying to know what started your, I don't want to say obsession, but what started your getting into the world of Paris and France and what started that?
Well,
What was the
I was
impetus?
in third grade, and which is where also when I wrote my first short story, and we all the teachers in the third grade got to teach a little class about they got to do their own little like mini unit on something they were really good at. And one of the teachers was, conversant in French, and she's taught us our un, deux, trois, ABC. And I loved learning a foreign language that nobody in my family spoke, and it was like my own secret code. And I, was low key obsessed with it. And I I like one of the first things I signed up for in high school when I had the chance to take a real French class was French. And I took all French all 4 years. And I ended up majoring it in college. Like we took our entrance exams. I toasted into junior level French in, as a freshman in college. So I was like starting my major as a junior, which was awesome. And I studied abroad almost immediately as soon as I could. So my sophomore year. And yeah, basically finished my freshman year and took off that summer for Avignon and stayed there through Christmas. And it was, yeah, and I went, and then I graduated a year early and went back to teach English in Bayeux in the Northwest. And, it's just been a love affair ever since. I taught French for a decade. And, I miss it. I do miss teaching French and using French. But man, I could not have written this book and done the research without like, being completely fluent in French for sure. But
Oh,
yeah,
I
it's
bet.
been a long time love affair with French.
I love it. And where in Paris is your favorite place to stay? What
Oh,
area?
what area? I like staying kind of toward the center. Like the sixth, I stayed in the sixth arrondissement, I want to say. So it was like 15-minute walk from the Musée d'Orsay. And it was, it was a nice neighborhood, didn't feel sketchy. But it wasn't like overrun with tourists like Montmartre or anything like right in the Ile de Saint Louis or anything like that. But yeah, it was just an enchanting little funky hotel. It was great.
Okay,
Yeah.
question from Darcy. Hi, Darcy. We love Darcy's one of our great customers here at Warwick's and is a wonderful reader, so we love having her on here. She said, I loved the Promise to the Crown books and would like to know what is next for both of you. So, Kate, you want to start with what's next for you?
Okay, absolutely. I was going to ask Aimie that same question anyway, because that is always something that we definitely want to know. But for me, coming next is, since I just had the Briar Club come out, and that was in July, You're not getting a book from me next year. I am sorry about that. It's just it didn't work out. I couldn't quite with the move and the 2 releases that came this year. I couldn't quite get the other one done, the new one done in time. It is done now, and it is off with my critique partners. It's going to be needing a fairly really serious amount of editing soon. That's my job for this fall and this winter. But it is going to be something a little different for me, and a little less in the way of straight historical fiction and a little bit more in the way of a little bit of magic realism, a little touch of fantasy in there. And it is right now, it has the title of The Astral Library. And it is very much my love letter to libraries, into books, and to book lovers, and anybody who has ever asked the question, have you ever wanted to live inside a book? So that's the book that's coming up.
Love it. Cannot wait. Aimie and I both were just like, ooh, can't wait for that one.
Yes, I can't wait. Like seriously, like, if it were, the beta version of this book would end up in my email, I would, would not be mad.
You would not be sad about that.
No. I remember I got to beta read The Huntress when it was 200,000 words, and it read like a 60,000 word book. Like it was so, I mean, I barreled my way, my ADHD brain. Like I have to listen to audiobooks because like if I sit down to try to read, I'm on my phone. Like it's hard. It's hard. And so, but I barreled through The Huntress when it was still, in its earliest stages, and I barreled through that sucker. Oh my God, I love that book. But yeah, and I just listened to the Briar Club like last month, and it was fabulous. I just loved it.
Thank you.
So Aimie, what's next? Yeah, what's next for you?
Okay,
Aimie?
so I have a book coming out because guys, I have been churning out a book every 6 months, and it's insane. But my next book is my second contemporary. My first contemporary was The Memory of Lavender and Sage, which has become a book that I am very, very fond of. And my next book is called The Wandering Season, coming April 1st. And it's a story of a Colorado woman who is a food matchmaker. She's a food broker. She pairs like artisan food crafters or farmers with restaurants and gourmet food, like grocery stores. And she loves her work. And she comes to Estes Park where her parents have retired for Christmas, and she gets a DNA test from her cousin, or for her sister rather, and her parents freak out because indeed the results are not going to be what she's been told. And she's like, I parsed this out in high school, guys. It's fine. Because she's petite, red hair, green eyes, and her family are all tall, Italianate, swarthy folk. And so and she's coming fresh off a breakup, and she's told everybody it's fine. But they send her off on a trip to Europe, and she gets to visit all the places where her her ancestors are from, and she's visited by visions of her foremothers in the moment where they decided to emigrate to America, because that was the decision they each made that led to her being a person. And she grapples with the fact that, maybe her not knowing where she was from wasn't fine after all. And it did impact a lot of the decisions she had made before this trip. And, whether or not she really wanted to be a chef or if she wanted to pursue this food matchmaking niche sort of career. But we get to go to the west coast of Ireland in Westport. We get to go to Bénac-et-Casinac in the southwest of France, which is a charming village, a little countryside outside of Milan, and a brief stop in Copenhagen, Denmark. And so it is called The Wandering Season, and it's my love letter to travel and food. And it's got recipes just like The Memory of Lavender and Sage. And it was an absolute delight to write. Absolutely delightful.
And please tell me that you got to go and do that trip.
Not okay. In various, I went to Ireland this past summer and got to go to Westport and got to do research for that and possibly my next historical. All digits crossed. I'm working on a proposal for my next historical that I'm very excited about. I'll just say Ireland. That's all I can say. I can't because it's still very much in its infancy. But
you can envy me because I know more details, but I'm not telling.
Yes. Kate and I, we DM a lot. So I'm very fortunate to have like this cool person as a friend. So yeah, Yeah, I've been to Benaki Kazanak. We went to in 2022, or we drove by. I should have said, let's stop and go wander around, but we were exhausted by that point. So I've been to the area in Dordogne, which is absolutely enchanting. And I I really hadn't been to that precise place outside of Milan, but I have been to northern Italy fairly recently. And it's been 20 years since I got to go to Copenhagen. But the stop there is very brief, and I love Copenhagen. My grandfather was Danish, and I never got to meet him. So going to Copenhagen when I was 18 was actually really meaningful. And I wanted to include that. Like this woman's ancestry is kind of mirrored off my own 23andMe results because why not? And yeah, and that's been fun. My entire family got their 23andMe done since I've been writing this book and comparing everything and seeing how different my siblings are that are actually my siblings. And it's like one of them 70% Irish and I'm only 58, you
Isn't
know.
that strange?
Yeah.
That
That's
to
really
me,
weird.
that's what's blowing my mind.
I had no idea genetics could do that.
I
Yeah, it
know.
can.
Yeah, it is because you get different genetics from each, you know, if you think about it, I really think about it from the grandparent perspective. It just all trickles down differently.
It's so fascinating to me though, because I always thought it's like, okay, you get half of this and half of that. It's but doesn't quite work that way.
Oh,
Um,
looking at my nieces and nephews is fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah. It's like, where did that
it
come
is
from?
yeah, it is
Yeah.
amazing that I did when my kids did it. I was like, what do you mean you're only this part? It was very strange. Kate, I
Yeah.
got to ask you a quick question too, and then we'll wrap it up because we're running out of time here. What's been your favorite place that you visited for research?
Oh, that's fun. Um, well, this trip I recently went on is was really something special because I got to visit some of the sites for the Alice Network that I hadn't been to before. And one of the things I really that was really meaningful was I got to go to the village known as Orador sur Glen, which is the site of the massacre that happens at the center of the Alice Network. And I couldn't go when I researched that book. I just could not do it. I didn't have it in the budget. I didn't have it in my schedule. I didn't have the money or the time to be able to go. And so I did, what historical novelists do when you can't go somewhere for research, which is you do your best with Google Maps and with vintage photographs and with vintage maps and with, war diaries and everything else that will help you paint a really complete picture. And I was lucky that there's a really good website that has so many pictures, so much information about it that I was able to do a good job with the research there. But I finally got to go. And that was really astounding. And it's a haunting place. It is, the site of this massacre where, over 600 people were murdered and this small village was basically wiped off the map. And they left the village there as, standing as a ghost town, with the burned out, blackened buildings. And they left the village as, it's a monument. They rebuilt next door, essentially the new village where any survivors lived and where there is still a modern, place to live. But this place has been left to stand as itself and as a monument to the dead. And it was a haunting place to visit. It was the thing that surprised me was that although it is haunting and terrible things happen there, it is a place that is not without beauty and dignity and grace. And you can feel that there. And so the fact that there are both, I mean, it was really intensely meaningful to be able to go there because it was literally almost 10 years ago that I was doing the research and just thinking, I wish I could go to this place and I just can't. So that is one of those things that, we always want to try to go to as many places as we can, not just, so we can eat macarons and write it off on our taxes, although that is certainly a plus. But, you never know what you're going to get when you visit somewhere because it's going to be, you always find something useful, but sometimes you just can't, it's not in the budget, it's not in the schedule, you can't do it. And then you do your best. And, I think my favorite experience along those lines was writing The Diamond Eye during lockdown in COVID. And, it's like I couldn't go to Washington, D.C., which I really would have liked to do. And so, there I am sitting there plotting a sniper duel out on Google Earth because that is the best that I could do.
Yeah, that was me with a bakery in Paris. So I wrote a bakery in Paris before we could travel and the School for German Brides. But with a bakery in Paris, I spent so much time in that little corner of Montmartre on Google Maps. it was the weirdest sense of deja vu when I got there because I mean, things weren't exactly as I pictured, but it was so close. It was scary.
Because your
But
brain's probably going, I've been here, but I haven't been
yeah,
here.
yeah. And it's like, but you go for the smell, you've got the visual maybe, but the smells, the vibe.
And
So
also, it's also that thing too. It's like there's just some things that it's a little less creepy if to other people maybe if you can investigate them in person and not be trying to figure something out on Google like I was doing with the diamond eye, where I'm like, so if someone was trying to shoot someone who was on the south portico of the White House, how long a shot is that, and are there any
yeah,
bushes?
that's date. It's like,
Are
dear
there any bushes
NSA,
to
I
hide
promise.
You want to cash your history out.
to hide a
Yeah,
gunman?
exactly.
And I'm like,
Dear NSA, I promise I'm a novelist.
and I was
Yeah.
just like, I can't believe I'm Googling this. I am so on a list somewhere.
But you got to fly to France so recently, you know that you're not on the no-fly list.
Yeah, at least
You're
there's
clear.
that, and so obviously somebody realized that, I wasn't actually looking to plan an assassination.
Yeah, you're a prominent enough novelist, it checks out.
Love it. Oh, ladies, we could talk. Well, I think we could continue talking all night.
Oh, probably. No question,
Sure.
no question.
Just real quick as we wrap up, Kate, for people, I think people know where to find you, but just in case we have some new listeners, where's the best way to find out what you're doing? What social media do you like to do?
I am on Instagram at Kate Quinn 5975. I'm also on Facebook. My author page is just Kate Quinn Author. And I have a newsletter as well. If you on my website, if you sign up for that, you get a free short story of mine that is actually about from the world of the Alice Network. So if you sign up for my newsletter, and I only send about 3 a year, so you're not going to get inundated, but you will get a free short story to read.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's enticing. And Aimie,
Yeah.
how about you?
Yeah, well, I have the same free short story deal from the world of Daughters of the Night Sky. And it's a chapter from Vanya's perspective, which is fun. And so it's www.aimiekrunyan, odd spelling AIMIE, RUNYAN with a K in the middle there. And I am on Instagram at Bookish Aimie, and I am all over all the other platforms at Aimie K Runyan, with the weird spelling. And yeah, and I do have the newsletter that comes out, I don't know, probably about 4 or 5 times a year at most. But it's fun, and you get to see a picture of my cat.
Love it.
So I feel like that's worth the price of admission right there.
For
It
sure.
is. It absolutely is. It's an
And we
Yeah,
have
he
to
has a
see-
column. He has a column in my newsletter every
Oh,
month.
I love that. Gotta have the gotta have to pet columns, and we got to see Kate's dog roaming around too tonight.
Yeah, that's my tripod wandering around in the
I
back
know,
during
so
winter
cute.
when I'm going to open the door of my office.
And I loved your husband coming in with wine. Could have been the best thing of the whole night.
Seriously,
sorry, ladies,
Steven's
but that
the
was
best.
the best.
Steven was the best.
All right,
That was
I'll tell him that.
awesome. Tell him that was my highlight. I loved your conversation, but that was pretty awesome. Taking care of the wife with some wine. I love it. There you go. Cheers. Ladies, it's always great
cheers.
having you. Thank you again. And everybody go buy this book, buy Kate's books, and support your local independent bookstore.
Absolutely.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.